What I want to talk to you about today is case head separation, or more specifically, how to get a stuck case out of your chamber. I'm going to pick on a buddy of mine a little bit by the name of Bryce Bergen, who runs the Long Range Shooters of Utah. About a year ago, he and I went out shooting out in the desert, and we're going to try to push out to 1.5 miles. He just gotten a 7-300 back from the gunsmith, and he had also just gotten an IV adjustable base that he wanted to mount up and see how far we could push out. Our goal was to hit the 1.5 miles. When he showed up, he didn't even have the scope mounted, so we hurried and mounted it and set a target out at 100 yards to get a good zero. His very first shot, when he opened the bolt, he said something felt a little bit off, pulled it back, and the head was stuck on his bolt. The rest of the case was still in his chamber. Now, we didn't really have anything out there that we could use to try to get it out. We tried with what little we had, but no matter what we did, we could not seem to get that case out. That effectively ended his day out there. He put a few rounds downrange with mine, but at the end of the day, he mostly sat and watched me shoot while he played around with the target vision. It was our first time really getting out and pushing out far with it as well, so that was kind of what he was using to figure it out. But even when he got home, he had a heck of a time trying to get that thing out. I think what he said he wound up doing was taking a bunch of like the wooden shish kebab skewer things and wrapping them up in duct tape and shoving them up into the brass, trying to get it to stick, and then pulling it out, and eventually that worked. That was a whole lot of work that really didn't need to happen, because there are other better ways to do it that are a whole lot less work and a whole lot easier, and something that you can even do on site. Now, essentially what you'll do is you'll take your earplug in your case that is stuck in your chamber. Keep in mind that the head will be gone. That's the whole issue. You will squeeze up your earplug, shove it down in there, and get it to fill in the neck. You're only using the earplug as a stopper, basically. You could do the same thing with cleaning patches, which is another thing that I've done in the past, but I personally prefer to use the earplug. It seems like it stops it up a lot better. Then, after you get your earplug, blocking the shoulder of your case, that is when you would take your epoxy putty and use something. You could use a piece of baling wire, a stick. If I'm here at the shop, I have a little pick that I like to use to basically take some of the epoxy putty, pack it down into the case. And the reason I like using the epoxy putty is it's malleable, but it's basically like silly putty, in a sense that you can work with it. You have about a minute of work time with it, so that gives you plenty of time to actually take it and mold and pack it into the case as much as you can, and then you let it set up for about half hour, 45 minutes, and it gets rock hard inside of that brass, which you then take your cleaning rod and you can tap it right out. And what I did, just for demonstration purposes, is I took an old piece of Grendel brass that I had lying around and basically wanted to mimic a case head separation. So I cut off the head and kind of smoothed off the edges a little bit just to make sure I didn't have any burrs that were going to bite in my chamber, and shoved it down in the chamber, and it actually stuck, which is something I wasn't planning on. I thought I'd be able to take it and just tap it and it would fall out. It's actually in there pretty decent to where this is something similar to what you would run into in the field. So I'll show you what I go through and how I do it to actually get that thing out. Okay, I know this is going to be a little bit hard to see, so bear with me. But there is my stuck case in my chamber, and I'm going to show you what I do in order to get it out. Okay, so the very first thing I will do is take the earplug and shove it down into the case. Works best if you smash it up as good as you can get it. You want it all the way down into the case neck, so you're not taking up very much room in the body that you can pack the epoxy in. And then, like I said, I've got a little pick that I like to use here. Got some weird angles in it that really helps to get it down into the recesses. And so take that, and just kind of use that to shove that down inside. Okay, so there you've got the earplug packed down into the case. Okay, so now that we have the earplug shoved up in the case, we're going to take the epoxy putty and use that to pack into the brass and make sure that we put enough in there to where it'll actually bond to the sides of the brass, where I'll be able to push it out with the cleaning rod. So the epoxy putty, Like I said, this particular one is called Steel Stick, made by JB Weld. There's all kinds of different manufacturers that make it. So I'll just take this. What it is it's a 2-part epoxy putty. It's actually really, really simple to use. So what it is you've got your main ingredient and your catalyst. Just cut off a little piece and then knead it together until it's all one solid uniform color. And then once you do that, it's ready to go. Just go ahead and pack it in the brass and let it set. Okay, so here's the epoxy putty after I've cut it off. It really doesn't take much. And like I said, you just take it and knead it. If you want to wear gloves, that's fine. It will discolor your fingers a little bit. So just take it and knead it around. Keep in mind that you will have a bit of an epoxy smell while you're working with this. And like I said, it really doesn't take long to knead it, to get it all. You just want to make sure that you go until it is one solid color. Okay, there you go, one good solid color. And then I'll take off a little piece, put it on the end of the pick. Got my little piece of epoxy on the end of the pick, and there with, just go ahead and reach that in. Kind of try to work it around a little bit and start to get it to stick. You just want to be careful that you're not getting any in the chamber itself. You want to keep it only in the brass. So again, just put a little bit on. You'll have to excuse me as I'm trying to do this and try to get a camera to where you could actually see it. And once again, just use that to keep packing it in there. You will feel the epoxy putty start to warm up a little bit as it starts to cure. And that'll kind of give you an idea of how much time you have left to work with it. Once it really starts to warm up, then you're going to be losing most of the time that you have to work with it. So you got to work kind of fast with it. Okay, that's actually starting to get full. Almost there. You don't necessarily need to fill up the full case. This is just a really small case. Like I said, it's my 6.5 Grendel. So it's just a tiny little case. If you're shooting something like a 300 Win Mag, you really don't have to worry about packing the entire case full. You just want to make sure that you get enough to where it will actually bond to the sides of the case while you tap it out. Okay, got that in there. I'll probably mess around with it a little bit more, trying to get it to fit in there nicely and make sure that it's actually stuck to the sides. And let it sit for about 45 minutes, come back and give it another go. Okay, I wanted to give you a little bit better view of what I did. So again, I just took the pick and packed that piece of brass full with the epoxy putty. And I will let it sit for about a half hour, 45 minutes, and come out and just simply tap it out with a cleaning rod. So another thing I do that I forgot to mention is the leftover epoxy putty. I will just set aside and hang on to it just so that I know exactly when it's actually hardened. So this, you can tell, you tap it. That is actually really, really hard now. There's no more moving it, no more bending it. It is set up, and that means that what is in the chamber is good to go. Okay, so now I will take the cleaning rod and just simply insert it through the muzzle. You just want to be careful you don't damage your crown while you're doing this. And put it in. Go. So right there's where I can feel it start to contact, and just give it a little bit of a tap. So we've got the earplug in the end, the brass, the epoxy putty, and again, you just use the cleaning rod to tap it out. But again, the best way to get a stuck case out of your chamber from a case head separation is to just never have to deal with it in the first place. if you're ever questioning any of your brass, whether you're loading warm, or in the case of Bryce, he was just using some brass that he has reloaded several times, he was thinking he was getting towards the end of its life, it's probably a better idea to just toss it out. But if it does happen, then this at least gives you another idea of a way that you can get it out.